Welcome to chat, ladies and gentlemen. Man, I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. So, they are currently playing round 4. They are not done yet. But I needed to get this video hooked up. So I do have the Wesley versus Fabiano Caruana game taken out of round 3. It is a very exciting game, if I do say so myself. And of course, for all of you guys that do not already know, I clipped it. But Magnus Carlsen has withdrawn from this tournament. He tweeted that he withdrew. And so I don't know exactly what made him do that. We don't really have a reason yet. But he has decided to throw in the towel and do other things. So he's kind of withdrawing from stuff this year. He's not playing the World Championships, as you guys know. And he withdrew from this tournament. Like I said, I'm not really sure. I just saw it. Yeah, that's a pretty crazy thing. So, yes. But to get to this game, though, all my people that are coming from the Philippines, as always, mabuhay to you. Kamusta na aking makaibigan. Hello, ulit. I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. But if you guys are ready to go, let's take a look and see what we got for this game. So we got the move e4, we got e5, knight to f3, we got knight to f6. So we do have the Petrov's defense, also known as the Russian game. We do see the move knight takes e5, which is like by far going to be the most common move you see. And then we kind of start to get into like branching points. We do see the move d6. We got knight back to f3, and then knight does take e4. And almost always in this position, you're going to see d4 and then d5. But we do see the move bishop to d3. And this kind of, creates some interesting development, for white. We do see the knight going back to f6. We got castles by white. Bishop to e7 because you kind of have to cover the e file. We see the move h3. We don't want any pesky bishop g4s. We got the move castles by black. And this starts the interesting development that I was talking about. c3 comes, and then after the move d5, we do have to move this bishop out of the way because it is blocking our d-pawn. So the bishop comes back to c2. We got bishop now to d6, and then we do have d4. And even though you kind of took a lot of tempi to kind of do what you just did, I mean, black, they did play d6 initially, and then they played d5. Then they went from e7 to d6. So, everything is actually kind of even. So you definitely do not want to do this in all of your games, because if your opponent can rapidly develop, then you just pretty much will probably lose. So we do see the move h6. Basically, black has the same idea. They don't want any bishops to g5. So we do see rook to e1. We got rook to e8. Rook takes e8 with check, and then the queen takes e8, and then we do have the move bishop to e3. We got knight to c6, and then the novelty of the game, which is knight b to d2. You definitely are thinking two possible scenarios. Either you go back to f1 with your knight and you're prepared to capture here if in case something happens, or you might want to put it on to g3 at some point, kind of whatever your plan. You don't really probably want to do that now with the bishop sitting here, but it's kind of up to you. So we do see the move a knight back to e7, and then we do have the move knight to h4. And Wesley's like, bro, I'm trying to do something. In fact, he's like, no, you're not. Just go back to where you came from. And Wesley Soul's like, all right, man, that's cool. I'll go back to where I came from. And then we do see the move knight to f5. Like I said, we are preparing probably to go knight to f1, which is what we do see in the game. And we are ready to take back this bishop capture with a knight. So the bishop does come to d7. We got bishop up to d3, which might look kind of strange because you're like, why am I just moving it back to d3? Well, you are thinking of possible queen to c2 or queen to b3s. So, I mean, it makes a whole lot of sense. So we do see the move c6. We got queen up to b3. One of the two ideas, queen to c2, queen to b3. Those are like pretty much the thoughts that you have in the game. This makes a lot of sense just because you're attacking that pawn that's over here on b7 looking kind of lonely. So we do see the move a knight to e4, and then the rook goes to e1. And you actually really kind of have a beautiful position for white. You kind of have all of your pieces doing what you want for them to do. Of course, this knight is not best placed on f1, but black basically just like, like helps with that immediately with the move a knight takes e3. And like I said, you are looking at taking back with the knight. So the knight does take on e3. And I mean, even though it's not nothing crazy at the moment, you do have a situation where this rook is opposite this queen. So you kind of want to do a little something, about that situation. But in a word that I kind of created, you probably heard it before, beautifuler. White is in a beautifuler situation in this particular case because, like I said, the main problem with white's position, even though white doesn't really have a lot of problems, is this knight on f1. So basically, Fabiano Caruana said, bro, I'm going to help you with that. And Wesley So said, thank you. Salamat. Knight takes e3. Like I said, knight takes e3, and white just has a much better position. You know, this knight is ready to kind of hop in and do some things. This knight's kind of ready and stuff like that to come. And you do have these problems on this e5. So we do have bishop coming to e6. We got queen taking b7 on some riskies. But anytime you do take this pawn over here and you do have your own pawn kind of undefended, you know, you're kind of going to go in, you know, it's going to be kind of a trading situation. So we do see rook over to b8, and then we have the very smart queen to a6, which is kind of your way to kind of get out of it. And, you know, Fabi had this is a very critical position because Fabi did have the ability to just simply capture the pawn back, but for some reason he doesn't do that. If we take a look and see what it looks like, you know, the rook would take b2. You would see, but I mean, Wesley does have to find knight to c4, pawn taking c4, bishop taking e4. Queen probably is going to come to c8. You got queen taking a7, and then the bishop going to d5. It's kind of dicey, but I mean, you know, both sides have kind of, you know, done what they needed to do, and it's fairly even. White has a slight advantage here. But after, like I said, we did see the move queen to a6. We see the move f5. And Wesley So's kind of just sitting there thinking, are you just going to let me hold on to my pawn? And so that's literally, he said, okay, all right, rook to e2. And you really don't have any problems. The good thing is this rook is protected by the bishop and the queen. So, I mean, you're not looking at any pin situations. And like I said, the rook is still opposite the queen. So, white has literally gotten everything they could possibly dream of out of this opening. So, the queen does come down to d7. We got queen down to a4. We see bishop down to f4. And we get into a really, dicey situation. The queen comes back to c2. We got h5. And Fabi is all completely in. You know, he literally just disregards any protection around his king, and his king is just completely wide open, which is not really, you know, a horrible situation in this particular position, because I mean, you don't really have a great way to kind of get to the king at the moment. We do see the move g3, and like I said, it gets real dicey. We got g4, so we have all these Weichenzug situations. We do see pawn takes g4, pawn takes g4, and then bishop taking e4. And of course, if we see this pawn capture, the bishop is going to back up, and we're just a piece to the good. So the pawn does take e4. We got knight to e5. Bishop takes e5, pawn takes e5, and then queen sliding over to c7. Most logical move because, I mean, this is an undefended pawn at the moment. And it's kind of hard to defend it. So the best thing you can do is kind of do a little counterattack. So we do see the move queen to a4. We got c5. A rook slides over to d2. You have to prevent d4 because, you know, if d4 can come, then you're trading, and you kind of have two, you know, pawns in the center of the board that can become kind of dangerous. So the rook does come to d8, and then we do see the knight coming down to g2. You know, we're thinking of possibly, you know, swinging it back over here to f4, you know, trying to place a little bit of an attack on this bishop. We do see bishop going back to f7. You know, this pawn is actually not really too much going anywhere. I mean, it's going to get captured, so you kind of have to decide, how do you want it to be captured? Are you going to let it be captured here or here? It kind of just is up to your taste. So the queen does come up to b5, and you are kind of trying to restrict black a little bit because if it takes, you're going to take and stuff like that. And you are eyeing this a7 pawn and stuff like that. So you're trying to make it really hard for black to kind of do what they want to do. So we do see the move d4. And then, like I said before, you kind of had to decide how you want to give that pawn up. So we do see the really nice move e6, which does redirect the bishop back to e6. And then after the bishop takes, we got pawn taking, and then queen going to b6. And this is actually a really nice find by Fabiano because of the situation where if we can successfully trade these queens off, this bishop actually becomes much better than this knight. So you have a bishop and a rook versus a knight and a rook. And I mean, because of the situation with, you know, trying to take this pawn back and this target and stuff like that, and the fact that this bishop is so much better in this open position, you know, white still has a slight advantage, but I mean, you basically just took the winning chances for Wesley So way down. So you do have the move queen back to e2. And so Wesley So understanding all this, he smartly avoids that trade. So we do see rook taking d4, rook taking d4, pawn taking d4. And then Wesley So just basically said, man, I'm a pawn grubber like Yasser Sirwan. Queen takes e4. And I mean, you know, white definitely has an advantage, but it's not like you're just you know, completely winning the game. So it does take some finesse. So the bishop does take on a2. And one of the main things that you have to think about in this position is this d pawn for black. So you will notice that white and black are both playing. White is playing against that pass pawn, and black is playing to try to, you know, maximize that pawn the best they can. Because That is black's bread and butter. If as white you cannot stop this pawn, you are kind of out of there. And if black can force this pawn through, I mean, they definitely have an advantage. Queen does go to g4 with check. The king slides over to f8. And then the queen does come down to f3. And like I said, I mean, white has a definite advantage, but it's not so clear cut because this d pawn can start to run if you're not careful. So the bishop does come back to f7, you know, and queen goes to a3. I mean, you really kind of have to protect this pawn. You really don't want to pass pawns in the position. You really kind of want to defend against that. So the king does slide over to e8. We got queen to a4 with check. King goes to d8 and the queen goes back to a3. And Wesley So might have been doing this just to kind of gain a little bit of time. But we do see the king going back to e8. And we have reached a point in the game that there is a really, really nice, like absolutely best move in this position. If you want to go ahead and stop the video and try to find it, go ahead and do so. Okay, so you know what is crazy, because this is actually kind of like an anti, like, you know, like positional type of move for a lot of people. I think a lot of people are probably thinking, I want to go knight to f4, because knight to h4 doesn't make any sense, because why would I put my knight on the rim of the board, right? Well, the crazy thing is the absolute best move in the position is actually knight to h4. And like I said, I mean, you are putting it on the rim, but you are trying to eyeball these two squares, and it makes it just a little bit harder for black to try to defend the position. So if we did see the move knight to f4, like I said, I mean, that definitely for a lot of people seems to be a lot more natural, but you are going to probably see bishop to b3, and then after queen to a1, you would probably see queen to c5, queen to e1 with check, and then king to d7. This king is in a lot better position. He's not really in the box that he was before, you know, we are kind of, you know, full steam ahead trying to get this pawn promoted and stuff like that. The queen can move and start to do, you know, what it wants to do. A really important feature is the fact that there are a lot of like square weaknesses around this king. So if the bishop can make it back to d5, you kind of have some mate threats going on. So you got to be kind of careful. But knight to h4 kind of changes the situation because it does leave a position where the king is right now, where if you can either go knight to f5 or knight to f3, you can place a check here on a4 and just simply pick up that pawn, and you are just 2 pawns to the good. So black has to be very careful. We do see bishop going to d5, trying to defend against these things, but the knight does find its way into f7, and then we do see the move queen to c7. Like I said before, you do have some light square weaknesses, so you got to be kind of careful, because if the queen comes down and, I mean, you step over here, I mean, that's just lights out. So you got to defend against that, and Wesley So makes the only move in the position that makes any sense, and that is the move g4. And you are prepared to meet this check with literally running the king like that. So we do see the move king to f7, trying to get a little safer. We do see the move f3, which, you know, the queen, of course, is protecting f3. You do see the move a5. A king goes to g2. You got queen up to e5. So, I mean, you know, Fabi is being a little sneaky here. You know, of course, probably Wesley So is not going to fall for something like this. But, you know, you are hoping that, you know, Wesley So falls asleep and just forgets tactics. And then you can discover an attack on his queen and stuff like that. But, I mean, Wesley So is not going to do that in this particular situation. So we do just see the move king to h3. We got queen down to e2. And we are now double attacking this pawn. So we kind of have to do something about it. So we do see the move f4. We got d3. And this kind of like sends things a little bit downhill for Fabi. We do see the move queen to d6. And then the bishop goes down to f3, which might kind of seem like, hey, man, I'm going to check here. And I'm going to pick up this knight. And I still got this passed pawn. But we do see the move queen to d7 with check. The king goes up to f8. The queen goes to d8 with check. The king goes to f7. The queen comes back to d7 with check. The king goes to f8. And to make sure that we do not repeat moves, we don't want to draw nothing, the knight does go to h6. The bishop comes down to g2 with check, but white does have some escaping that it can do. So the king goes over to g3 first. You know, we definitely don't want to allow any trades right here with stepping to h4 immediately. So that is why we see g3 first. The queen goes to f3 with check. The king goes to h4. And now the queen cannot do that check. The queen goes down to f2 with check. The king goes to g5. The queen goes to c5 with check. And then we do see the move a knight to f5. And we have just kind of constructed like a little fortress situation. You can see that white is in clear, complete command of this game. The bishop does come to d5. We see queen to d8 with check. The king goes down to f7. The queen goes to d7 with check. The king goes back to f8. Queen to d8 with check. And this is the exact position where Fabiano Caruana, like, he claims a draw. he was saying, hey, aren't we going to get into a threefold? I'm not sure if he was kind of tired or if, I mean, because we did repeat twice. So, I mean, if we do go down to F7 with the king and then the queen does check again, then that would be a draw. But Wesley So is completely winning this position. There is no way that he is playing the move queen to D7 with check. So after the arbiter decides, hey, that's not a threefold, the king does come down to F7, and then the key in the situation is going knight to D6 with check, and you are getting completely mated in this position. There is not a way to, avoid it. And so after knight comes to D6 with check, the king slides over to G7. We see queen to E7 with check. The king goes up to G8. And then we do see the move king to H6. And it is in this position that Fabiano Caruana does resign the game. And like I said, you are in a complete mating box. The only thing that I'll show you literally the only way that puts off checkmate for the longest. And then I'll show you a quick variation. After the king goes to H6, if Fabi was to continue to play, the only literal thing he can do is go queen takes D6 with check, just basically giving up his queen for the knight. And then after the queen does take D6, and like I said, these are the only moves that you can make to put off checkmate for as long as you possibly can. The king has to come down to F7. You would see F5, and then you would see D2. And after the queen came to D7 with check, the king goes up to F8. The king goes to G6. I mean, you literally can make any move on the board, and you're going to be getting mated immediately. So let's just put a 4, for example, and then you would be seeing queen to D8, and that is the longest mate that's possible. If you don't want to give up your queen after king goes to H6, you would be having to go bishop to F7. But this just allows queen takes F7 with check, king goes to H8, and then we do have king to G7, and that is mate. So, of course, Fabiano is seeing all of this stuff, and he's knowing when you get to this point here, after king to H6, that he has to sacrifice his queen for this knight, and that is just not something that he wanted to go into. So, Malaka see Wesley So in this one. This is a really nicely played game. I mean, both players kind of had some chances, but I mean, it's kind of mysterious how Fabi didn't just take the pawn because it wasn't a poison pawn. It's kind of the, the thing that you do after you get your pawn took if, you just got your rook on that half open file. So, I don't know, man. He just played a little bit safe, and Wesley So is not the person that you want to play safe against. So, I appreciate everybody very much. Maraming salamat, King Makaibigan Paalam, and I will see you guys next time.